Imagine the vastness of a world that had yet to know man. A world where the wind whispered ancient secrets and plants emerged from virgin soil, never having felt the touch of human hands. There, in the twilight of this primitive universe, the pumpkin began its journey. A fruit that, for millennia, would remain in the shadows, growing on the edges of forests, enduring the scorching sun and torrential rains, waiting for the moment when its story would intertwine with ours. Human civilizations would rise and fall, empires would build walls only to be reduced to dust, but the pumpkin was always there, silently waiting. It witnessed the emergence of languages and rituals, the creation of gods, and the destruction of kingdoms. With each cycle, it grew, blossomed, and died, only to be reborn, as if carrying the secret of eternity within its seeds. Let us now unravel the threads of this narrative. Let us return to the beginning, to the moment when the pumpkin and humanity met for the first time and began to share a common destiny. The first signs of the pumpkin's presence date back over 7,000 years. Archaeological excavations in ancient Mexican caves have uncovered seeds and remains of wild pumpkins, indicating that the people of that time were already familiar with and used the fruit. But it wasn't the pumpkin we know today. Far from it. These were smaller versions, with a hard shell, bitter flesh, and seeds that withstood the scorching heat of the day and the biting cold of the night. What might seem a mere detail to many is the origin of a saga that would change the world. The first humans who encountered the pumpkin lived in an unforgiving environment. Hunger was a constant presence, survival a daily battle. And in this scenario, the pumpkin represented hope. It wasn't an obvious choice. After all, it was bitter, hard to break, and required effort. But there, in those seeds, was something that promised sustenance, a promise of life in times of scarcity. The ancient peoples learned to select the less bitter pumpkins, to domesticate what was once wild. They planted them on riverbanks, in open fields, and cared for them as they would their own children. And in return, the pumpkin grew, becoming more generous, more nutritious. It transformed into a silent companion on humanity's journey, a constant presence that offered sustenance when the earth refused. The Olmecs were the first to realize that the pumpkin was more than just food. For them, who lived around 1200 BC to 400 BC, the pumpkin was a symbol of life itself, a tangible manifestation of the cycles of nature. They believed that within each pumpkin seed was a spirit, a force that connected to the gods and the cosmos. Imagine the scene, an Olmec village at dusk, as the sky tinges golden and purple. Men and women gathered around a fire, holding freshly harvested pumpkins, their shells glowing in the firelight. Each seed they removed was a gift from the gods, a fragment of eternity that linked them to their ancestors and the gods who dwelled in the stars. The pumpkin was used in rituals, ground into paste, mixed with spices, and offered to the gods. When the rains did not come, when the earth refused to yield its fruits, priests sacrificed pumpkins in elaborate ceremonies, believing that by doing so, they were reviving the cycle of life, bringing abundance back. The Maya inherited the reverence for the pumpkin from the Olmecs, but took it further. For the Maya, each part of the pumpkin had spiritual meaning. The flesh represented the earth's body, the seeds were the promise of rebirth, and the shell was the barrier between the world of the living and the world of the gods. In their ceremonies, the Maya would draw the outlines of pumpkins on their bodies, believing this would protect them from evil spirits. On celebration days, they carved pumpkins into complex geometric shapes and lit them with candles made of beeswax. These illuminated pumpkins were considered portals to other worlds, beacons guiding the spirits of the dead on their journey to the beyond. During lunar eclipses, it was believed that the spirit of a pumpkin ascended to the heavens to fight against demons threatening to swallow the moon. And so, as the shadow began to cover the moon's face, the priests offered pumpkin seeds to the fire, believing that each crackle, each spark, was a sword helping the pumpkin in its celestial battle. When the European conquerors arrived on the American continent, they brought with them a thirst for gold and glory, but also their ignorance of the traditions and cultures they encountered. To them, the pumpkin was a grotesque fruit, lacking the shine of apples or the elegance of grapes. It was something to be ignored, a curiosity unworthy of attention. But even so, the pumpkin persisted. In the markets of Tenochtitlan, the colonizers watched in puzzlement at the piles of colorful pumpkins and the indigenous women who sold them with pride, as if offering gold in their calloused hands. And slowly, the pumpkin began to infiltrate the European diet. It wasn't an immediate acceptance. The first account spoke of its exotic flavor, its texture, as something that didn't match the European palate. But in times of need, when crops failed and hunger threatened, the pumpkin emerged as a silent savior, offering its nutrient-rich flesh and crunchy seeds. In the Northern American colonies, the pumpkin became one of the pillars that supported the early settlements. The winters were merciless, the fields reluctant to produce, and many settlers would have succumbed to hunger if not for the pumpkin. Alongside corn and beans, it formed the triad of foods that ensured the settlers' survival during the long months of cold. The stories of the first Thanksgiving days are intertwined with the pumpkin. The accounts speak of pies, stews, and pumpkin bread, prepared in an act of celebration and gratitude. It was a simple feast, but laden with deep meaning. The pumpkin was the manifestation of the earth's generosity, the proof that even in the darkest times, there was hope. The Halloween tradition, as we know it today, was born from ancient Celtic practices brought by Irish immigrants. But it was in American fields, where pumpkins grew abundantly, that the tradition took on a life of its own. The carved pumpkin, the jack-o'-lantern, became the guardian of homes, a sentinel that warded off evil spirits that roamed autumn nights. The flame inside the pumpkin was a challenge to the unknown, a declaration that, even in the face of darkness, the light of hope would never be extinguished. Every year, Halloween renewed the pumpkin's role as a link between the world of the living and the dead, reinforcing the idea that, like the fruit, we too are part of an eternal cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Over time, the pumpkin left the fields and gained space on screens, in books, and in music. Writers like Washington Irving, in his story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, used the pumpkin as a symbol of mystery and terror. Painters and sculptors found in it a source of inspiration, a representation of the curves and forms of nature. And at fairs and festivals that spread across the United States and Europe, the pumpkin became the center of attention, celebrated in contests, parades, and events that attracted crowds. It ceased to be just a fruit and became an icon, a trademark of an era, a symbol of life's transience and beauty. Scientists and doctors finally began to uncover what ancient peoples already knew. The pumpkin was truly a gift from nature. Rich in vitamins, antioxidants, and fiber, it could prevent diseases, strengthen the immune system, and provide essential nutrients. But it wasn't just the flesh that held secrets. Pumpkin seeds, consumed by indigenous peoples for centuries, revealed themselves to be a superfood, full of benefits. In the 21st century, the pumpkin found a new way to express itself. The flavor of pumpkin spice invaded coffee shops, bakeries, and supermarkets, becoming a true cultural phenomenon. It wasn't just a passing trend, it was the pumpkin reinventing itself, finding its place in a world that seemed to forget its roots. The pumpkin, which began its journey as a humble fruit in the forests of Mexico, traveled a path that few could have imagined. It endured the passage of time, the changing seasons, the rise and fall of empires. It became a symbol of persistence, hope, and rebirth. Today, when we cut a pumpkin, when we smell its aroma, when we turn it into something that nourishes our body and soul, we are, in a way, connecting with this long history. A story that reminds us that even in the face of adversity, there is something within us that always finds the strength to bloom. It's not just another story. It's about who we are. If this journey moved you, make your mark. Leave your like now. Feel what it's like to be part of something bigger. Subscribe to the channel, because stories like this aren't found just anywhere. Turn on the notification bell and leave your comment. Tell us what this story awakens in you.